Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for attending this session. So I'm going to be talking about reinforcement learning for AI and for neuroscience. I'm Kai ARULKUMARAN, and I'm a research team lead at ARAYA. So I'll give a quick background. So I'm a little different from most of the people here. Actually, I have a background in AI, and I'm interested in contributing to neuroscience research. So I did my PhD in bioengineering at Imperial College London, finished in 2020. And while I was there, I was doing internships in a few places. So Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook, and DeepMind, where I got to experience some of the best AI research labs in the world. And then I joined ARAYA in 2020 as a researcher and then eventually as a team lead. So my research agenda is really to understand biological and artificial intelligence and try and apply this to solve real-world problems. So some of the stuff that I've done during my career, I've looked at making more sample-efficient machine learning algorithms, so ones that really need less data to work, so things inspired by the hippocampus, for example. And also using RL algorithms to solve problems in, say, medical imaging, such as tracking axon structures in microscopy images. And my research is really centered around reinforcement learning with applications to AI and also coming from neuroscience. So what is reinforcement learning? I think we can say it's sequential decision-making, so decision-making over time. And this happens under states of uncertainty, so generally under uncertainty over the state of the world. So looking at this diagram on the right, we can see that there is an agent, and we can say this is learning using reinforcement learning that exists in an environment. And at every time step, the agent perceives the state of the world. It then executes an action based on what it perceives, and the environment transitions. And the environment transition includes not just the next state, but some feedback in the form of a reward. So this can be positive, a rewarding thing, or it can be some form of punishment, for example. So examples of RL settings include, for example, a robot. So if we want to get a robot to do something, we can use reinforcement learning, for example, to manipulate objects or have a robot that navigates an area. We have virtual characters, for example, in a video game. If they have an objective like navigation, working their way through a maze, we can also formulate this as a reinforcement learning problem. And of course, we think that we can actually describe human behavior under the framework of reinforcement learning because we have our goals and objectives. We perform actions in the environment and we get feedback from the environment in terms of, say, we have delicious food, or we get punishment for doing something wrong. So my research is really centered around using reinforcement learning to understand human intellect as well, human behavior, and use this to develop intelligent agents. So throughout my PhD and a little bit afterwards, some of the things I've worked on have been to develop novel reinforcement learning algorithms, and this has been inspired, maybe loosely, by cognitive science or neuroscience. So for example, humans, we build sort of abstract notions of the world, and we can decompose tasks into different levels. And so this has led to work in hierarchical reinforcement learning. We construct explicit models of the world. We can really think about how things work and simulate this. And we plan based on this, and this leads to work in model-based reinforcement learning. We don't just do things ourselves, we can learn from others, and this is field of imitation learning. And diving a little more deeply into neuroscience, well, we have different types of memory. We learn from the world, we store it. We have semantic memory, for example, of understanding of things, and also episodic memory, which is a very personalized memory. And we can use this to decide what to do, and so this leads to algorithms for episodic control. So I joined ARAYA, where we sort of have expertise in the science of consciousness. So it's something that seems very vague, but it's something that we all seem to have, and it's very interesting to study this. So with some of the expertise at ARAYA, some of the work I've been doing is to understand what functions consciousness might have. Is it something that just emerges as a side effect, or is it actually something that could really fundamentally be tied to intelligence and clever decision-making behavior? And so in this work down at the bottom, actually what we try to do is ground theories of consciousness using concepts from artificial intelligence and reinforcement learning. So theories of consciousness, like, they can be somewhat vague. They're talking about things we don't really have much access to. So the idea with this is to really try and ground them in something. And once you ground things, you can actually be more scientific, you can make hypotheses, and you can try and test these things out. So the three theories that we really focused on were global workspace theory, information generation theory, and attention schema theory. So global workspace theory is probably one of the best known theories of consciousness. It's an idea that out of all of the sort of sensory modalities and even sort of motor action modalities, all of this information is sort of aggregated in a central area with amodal representations. So everything comes into the central area, is processed. This is where working memory could be happening, and then all of this information is broadcast out. And one of the key things here is attention to our input, so we're not always aware of every single sort of bit of information that we get in, but we're actually processing and attending to things that are most behaviorally relevant, for example. Information generation theory, actually, which was proposed at ARAYA, is the idea that the consciousness contents are not just sort of received passively from the world, but are really shaped by an internal model that we build. So actually we build a rich model of the world, and our consciousness contents are like highly linked to the fact that we have a model of the world, and that's what we're working with. And finally, attention schema theory, I think, is something that people might think really relates to the notion of knowing oneself and attention and the idea of self-awareness. So if I say the word consciousness, then we usually think of awareness, and this can be linked to attention. But I think one thing that resonates with a lot of people is the idea of self-awareness, that we have a self. And so attention schema theory is this idea that not only do we attend to certain objects, so we focus on certain things, but we have a mental representation of this. So it's not that I can just see someone in the room, but I have a representation of myself seeing someone in the room. So these are sort of three theories that explain different aspects of consciousness that we thought can work cohesively and actually have functions towards intelligence. So what we did is we proposed some links between these theories, which we think can relate to functional abilities and intelligence in humans and also AI systems. So we think this could be a general framework. And in particular, we picked on this idea of mental time travel as a cognitive faculty. So mental time travel, we have, again, on this diagram on the right, we think actually represents a very intelligent cognitive ability that perhaps maybe doesn't even exist in current AI systems. And it allows us to really imagine things beyond the scope of what we've seen in the world. So I can imagine myself on the moon, for example. This is far beyond something that I've ever really seen or experienced in my life. But combining all of these things, so the fact that we can pick out bits of information, that we have an episodic memory and a world model that we can use to plan out and imagine scenarios and really place ourselves in it. So we propose that actually all of these can be put together and be used as part of the faculty for mental time travel, which is something that leads to very intelligent, forward-seeking behavior. And so if you're interested, please check out this paper. And what is the practical use? We're talking about consciousness, which seems very abstract. So in terms of the moonshot goals, if we want to build an internet of brains, then actually how are we going to link these agents? And I would say that actually we're not going to link every single bit of information, but we're going to be linking their conscious contents. This is not, raw sensory percepts, but this is high-level information in consciousness that we have, which is objects and goals and maybe even emotions. And so actually now we've embarked on a project to actually try and realize this and build an agent that contains conscious information, and sort of beyond, say, very toy implementations of conscious agents, we really want to ground this in sort of realistic data. So we're working with a simulator that gives both realistic visuals and audio information, and we built an agent which has a global workspace style memory. We train this agent to sort of navigate in this environment using RL, and we're trying to investigate how this agent performs, how its representations differ to a more standard agent which doesn't have this capacity. Just going to spend the last bit of my talk talking about one of the big projects that I'm embarking on at ARAYA, which is to work on shared autonomy. So how do we liberate humans from biological limitations, or more close to home, help those with disabilities? So we can augment human abilities, and with shared autonomy, actually, we let a human and an AI jointly control an agent. So some examples of this might be a car with cruise control, or even sort of the level of self-driving we have nowadays. It can be a video game character. You ask it to do something, but all of the simple steps on the way that the video game character uses AI to perform, and actually even prosthetic limbs could be thought of in this way. So there are many paradigms and settings, different user interfaces, different levels of AI autonomy that can occur. And I'm trying to work on this, formulating this under the framework of reinforcement learning again. So the human provides a goal. And there are many sort of different inputs we could be using, so mainly focusing on EEG, but also EMG, eye trackers, all sorts of things like this. We have to consider different problems: latency, signal to noise ratio, how easy it is to use. So for example, we need to really think about the interface that a person uses with this. Outside of the lab, we want to make something practical. There are many paradigms and ways to get the information from these different input devices that we have to consider. And we also need to be able to interface this with an intelligent RL agent that can perform actions. And so the agent we want to work with is a robot arm. We want to actually be able to do stuff in the real world, and hopefully use something like EEG and these other sensors to actually provide an agent that can do a wide range of tasks. So I believe like a lot of the existing work might show that EEG can control a robot, but it's usually limited to, say, one task. And given the advances in reinforcement learning and AI, actually we want to be able to take this, integrate this with EEG human inputs, and be able to provide a person with an interface where they can control a robot to do a lot of different things. But of course, there are still many challenges to get this to work, even in simulation. And with the real world, there's obviously much more complications. So in closing, I'd say there's been tremendous advancements in the field of AI. And for AI researchers, we should really try and tackle real world problems. And to neuroscience researchers, actually, there's a lot out there now that we can use. And I think we should take advantage of that. Thank you.